Hi there, I'm Katy-Rose, and in today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about redefining or redesigning your life. And the topic that I'm going to talk about today is something called design thinking. Now, I did not come up with this concept. I will leave a link in the description to a little bit more about kind of how it works and the general theory behind it. But I am going to be applying the main kind of steps in design thinking to when we are developing ourselves, when we are changing our lives, when we are coming up with new habits and building new routines. So this is a little bit about how to kind of reframe your problems, if you're someone who wants to reinvent yourself, if you just want to redefine some of the experiences that you're having, or if you're interested in sort of intentional living and life design, then this may be useful for you. One of the reasons that I wanted to look at design thinking process is because the main concept within it is that the problem we start with isn't always the one that we actually need to solve, and that this is one of the reasons that we get really stuck when we're trying to do self-development work, when we're trying to make habits, make changes. We can get quite stuck because the problem that we think we need to solve isn't actually going to solve what our actual problem is. So the first step in design thinking is something called empathize, which is really about setting aside those assumptions of what we think the problem is, what we think is going on, and actually really trying to dig into what the difficulties are. So particular techniques for this with regards to self-growth are kind of journaling or reflection, kind of questioning yourself about what's working, what's not, any of the kind of journal prompts that you might kind of come up with that would ask you questions to review your week, your year, how you spend your time. Any of those kind of things can be great tools for helping us to do step one, which is to really start looking at what are the issues, what are the difficulties, what things do need to change, and what things will kind of, what are the what things actually need to change in order to make a difference in my life. Step two is to define the core problems. So once you've started kind of journaling, started reflecting, is to become aware of which of those is perhaps the biggest problem, which of those is the one that's having the biggest impact, or even just prioritizing it. So I talk about prioritization quite a lot, but one of the difficulties I think we have is that we want to change all the things, we want to do everything, we want to be that perfect thing, we want to reach that potential, and we want it now. And actually what we know is that we need to take baby steps, and we need to generally, most people need to do one thing at a time. So when you're defining the core problem that you want to address, one of the things can be to be quite aware of how you're feeling when you're thinking about each thing, kind of aware of what your body's doing, of the thoughts that are going through your head. There's a great quote which is, how many people were in the shower with you this morning? Because we're all accompanied by voices in our head, and they're all trying to get attention and tell us things and ask us things and demand things of us. So I'm going to talk very briefly about mindfulness. This is not that I'm saying you'll have to meditate for 30 minutes a day, but it's about becoming aware of what's going on in our brain, what thoughts are there, what kind of expectations we have for ourselves, and just really being aware that they exist. So when we're looking at prioritizing, when we're looking at what is the core issue that I'm struggling with, what is the thing that I need to change to make things better, that we're aware, that we're able to kind of pause, that we're able to kind of almost take back a little bit of control over what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what's kind of taking up our mental energy and space. And one of the great things for kind of pausing and for being mindful that isn't sort of sitting meditation is just to acknowledge and name how we're feeling and what we're doing. So saying things like, oh, I'm feeling a little anxious about this, or oh, I have a few worries about this. Saying that out loud, getting it off your chest, writing it down in a journal, that can help you just to almost break through that little, I suppose, the little cycle that we get ourselves in where the anxiety is keeping itself going. So if you want to know a little bit more about kind of breaking the cycle of anxiety, certainly using something like cognitive therapy, do let me know in the comments below, because I can do a video about that. So once we're aware of what the problem is, once we've defined it, we've prioritised it, we've picked what we're going to do probably most soonest, we've picked what thing we're going to work on first. The third step is something called ideate. So it's that kind of ideation, it's coming up with ideas, basically. So we want to generate some ideas, look at alternative ways of viewing the problem, thinking a little bit about possible solutions we can start to come up with. So I tend to use this to ask, what can we control? Because a lot of the things in self-development may have come about because of things outside of our control. It's in our environment, it's what people have said to us, or things that have happened to us. So when we're looking at ideas and about making changes and other ways that we could look at the problem, which I suppose is a big part of sort of reframing and redefinition, we do want to be aware of what would help if it was changed, what can I do, what's within my control. Because really designing life design, intentional living with purpose, it's all about having a bit more control over what our lives are like. Step 4 is what they would call prototype in design thinking. So prototyping your life in the instance that I'm talking about is like designing a life vision. So I have another video about kind of coming up with your, whichever side it's at, which is about coming up with your life vision. So there'll be links to that. And it's about trying on different ideas for size and tweaking them as you go. So in design thinking, this is where you would prototype 3 or 4 different solutions to this problem, see which one's going to work best, kind of explore where some of the issues are in terms of coming up with a solution, what that may not work actually, let's try something else. And reframing the idea as a prototype allows us to kind of have flexibility to tweak them, to not feel like we failed if we find one that doesn't work. Because I think that with life design in particular and intentional living, we do kind of have this picture perfect kind of idea in our head, it's ideal. And if we aren't on the right track, or we don't do it, we feel like we've wasted our time, we feel like we've failed, and that's just not realistic. So in prototyping, we're investigating those problems and solutions that we generated in the previous step, and we're trying them on for size. So in prototyping, you might want to draw out things that are in your future. You might want to list the values that you want to hold. If you know Danielle Laporte's desire map, you might want to look at the core desires that you want to be feeling in the next year or 5 years' time. Or if you're someone who likes to create vision boards, then that's another option in terms of prototyping it, really starting to get your head into what would this be like if this were a solution that worked for me. Step 5 is the test phase. So in design thinking, this is your final phase. So this is where you rigorously test the solutions, particularly the one that you've been prototyping that seems to be working the best. Often the results that you generate during this test phase will then help you to refine, redesign, to refine and redesign one or more problems. So it might be that actually you go through the test phase, and what that does is it actually elicits another core sub-problem that you actually need to work on. So as I said at the beginning, design thinking focuses on actually that a lot of the time, the problem we think we're solving isn't actually the problem we need to solve. So in the testing phase, we want to look for, does this life vision match up with what my core values are, what I want to get out of life, where I've been walking, thinking about some of the steps I've already taken. And I think it's difficult to know if your test sort of worked, shall we say, if your test has been useful in the self-development world, because we don't have one size fits all way of measuring it. But for me, it would be about clarity and purpose. So is this what I think I want right now? Is this from what I currently, from the information I currently have about what I want, who I am, who I want to be, does this fit? And we know that number one thing that drives people's satisfaction in life is a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning. So again, does your life vision fit or match up with what you want from a life purpose, from meaning Is it making a contribution to a cause that you care about? So in addition to these 5 steps in design thinking, I kind of like to add my own one in. So we are not born with a burning sense of purpose, but we make meaning and purpose by living our lives, by experimenting with things, which is why this design thinking process is so useful in my opinion. But the 6th step that I want to talk about a little bit is taking action. So it's building your way forward. So one of the reasons that I think a lot of people struggle with success and feeling fulfilled is that they think there is one ladder. So it might be a career ladder, the corporate ladder. You know, you get to this 6-figure job and you're the boss or CEO of the company and you've made it and you've got the house and you've got the car and you've got the wife and the kids and everything is as it should be. But you don't feel satisfied, you're not happy, you're not fulfilled. Equally, it might be that for you just want to make enough money to, you know, treat your family to pie and be able to pay your bills. And for you, that's your one thing. But actually, do you also then have regrets that you didn't pursue studying science because you wanted to do making breakthrough cancer treatments? You know, is there some part of your purpose that you have almost shut the door on because you feel there's only one path, there's only one ladder? And again, when we look at research, the people who feel the most satisfied have multiple ladders to make the most out of their lives. So there is no one size fits all road to meaning. There is no right path for any one person that someone else can decide. But the one thing that I do want just to leave you with after this video is actually, what ladders are you halfway up? What paths have you walked up? What streets can you take that will allow you to find meaning and purpose in multiple aspects? So whether that's spirituality, whether that's relationships, whether that's career, whether that's just personal accomplishments, whether that's in a self-knowledge sort of way, you know, whatever your ladders are, whatever those paths are for you, we know that actually taking multiple and leaving a few doors open and working a little bit on each one tends to lead to people feeling more fulfilled, more satisfied and happier than people who just have one focus and sole focus and drive themselves straight at it. If that works for you, you know, as I said, there's no one size fits all. So in a way, it might be that having one ladder works for you, and that's fantastic. If you've got that and that's your purpose and, you know, you're nailing it, fantastic. But I think one of the reasons that a lot of us get stuck is that we think there's one ladder, and actually we need multiple ladders to make the most of our lives. So as I said, this is just one approach, but it's an option to try out. So just in case it works for you, something to think about. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos if you haven't subscribed already, and I will see you again in the next video.